Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to Late Night Learning. I'm your host, Dr. Anthony Palomba. Now today we are going to be continuing and wrapping up our discussion on media finance. So earlier in lecture, we were talking about AOL-Time Warner merger, and it really didn't process well. We know that AOL was very eager to merge with Time Warner because Time Warner, after all, was a content company, right? Time Warner, even in 2000, had Time Magazine and Warner Brothers, and it also had TBS, TNT, True TV. It might have had True TV in 2000. I'd have to check on that, but also HBO as well. So we know, once again, AOL being kind of a telecommunications company, right? Being one of those internet service provider companies, merges with a content company. Time Warner is a content company. It creates information, news, right, through its Time magazine, and it creates entertainment content. AOL is kind of like a telecommunications company in some respects. This idea of being an internet service provider, being able to connect people to things, it made sense for the merger to happen. But we know in 2002 there was a dot-com bubble burst. People valued internet companies too high. We know that advertisements on the internet were shaky. Advertisers didn't know if they were getting a return on investment. If I show this internet banner advertisement for Honda cars or Mercedes-Benz, does this work? Does this work for persuading people to purchase my car? I don't even know how to track the return on investment. So that lowers the value of these internet companies and websites. And additionally, there really is no innovation. AOL has a difficult time ramping up its own products and services. We know AOL was really good with instant messaging, with chat rooms and blogs and like that, and stuff like that, but there was no ramping up or improvement on the search engine. So Google just steps in and takes over. We know that AOL also had dating and had other kinds of social group meets, but it didn't innovate enough to keep up with MySpace or Facebook or even Match.com. You know, AOL did have the roots of all of this kind of stuff. They just didn't innovate. And so by 2002, as we stated, AOL does lose about $99 billion. And so from there, it's unfortunately tagged as one of the worst mergers and acquisitions to ever happen in really in industry, but especially in the entertainment and media spheres. So let's get started with some of the other particular mergers and acquisitions. CBS Viacom is a very funky story. CBS Corporation and Viacom do merge in 2000. Now, this is 4 years after the Telecom Act of 1996, and so we know CBS is a legacy company, and we know that Viacom is a cable company, or really a media conglomerate, so to speak, because Viacom also owns Paramount Pictures, which is its film division. And so this is why you may see Rugrats or other Viacom TV shows made into movies. And if you're paying attention to the kinds of films Viacom has put out, they're usually based around TV shows from Comedy Central, Nickelodeon, BET. I believe Paramount Pictures was behind the Jackass movies because Jackass, the TV show, was on MTV, which was also owned by Viacom. And so here, what we have is that CBS and Viacom do get together, but the Viacom share price tanks in 2005. So 5 years into the relationship, Viacom stock goes down. The people over at CBS are saying, we want to be spun off. We don't like this. Sumner Redstone, the CEO here, splits the companies. But Viacom and CBS are now back together as of August 19. It's imperative that these two corporations find better and new ways to make money. It's very difficult right now with advertising and affiliate fees. We know that CBS earns money from DirecTV, Time Warner Cable, Comcast Cable, and other cable and satellite companies who pay for the privilege of airing these channels, right? So those are what affiliate fees are. CBS will earn money from cable and satellite companies because they pay for the privilege to carry CBS. ESPN is by far and away the most valued cable channel because they, I believe, charge about $7 per subscriber per month. And so if there's 100 million subscribers who have access to ESPN in the United States, and these subscribers, and it's 100 million across DirecTV and Comcast and Time Warner Cable and these other cable and satellite companies, that's a lot of money. And then we also know that network and cable channels also earn money from advertising, from simply having commercials. And so these are the most important revenue streams for these companies. And so TV advertising currently is falling due to falling linear TV ratings. When you hear linear TV ratings, that is appointment viewing. And of course, things are falling right now because none of you who are listening are watching Modern Family 8 o'clock on Wednesdays, which is time appointment viewing, right? There's an appointment, there's a time in which a new episode of Modern Family will air. Instead, Jennifer and Sharona and Michelle are waiting until the next day, or maybe the ladies are waiting until Friday to watch that episode. This confuses and creates issues within advertising schemes because now we have to think about commercials +3 or commercials +7. So you may see commercial metrics including C3 and C7. We need these as advertisers because we need to keep track of how many people watch a show 3 days after and 7 days after, because they will be exposed to the advertisements themselves. This is an important way to make sure that we're honing in on return on investment when we think of ways in which that we advertise. There's a steady growth of digital MVPDs. These are otherwise known as SVODs. It has not canceled out massive declines in subscribers at Comcast, DirecTV, and other legacy MVPDs. But it is growing as a particular share. We still have people subscribing to SVOD, which are your Netflixes, your Hulus, your HBO Gos. And we also have those same people with cable and satellite. And you may know some people who do that. Yeah, I have a DirecTV package, but I also have Netflix. Yeah, I have Hulu, but I also have Time Warner Cable. We still have people who are doing both. But of course, the fear is what happens in the future. We have a lot of cord cutting going on. Will this trend continue? The goal is to make them more formidable at the negotiating table with distributors. That really is the goal here. When you're able to advertise on CBS, you might also gain access to Nickelodeon, Comedy Central, and BET. Or when you advertise with CBS and Viacom, there is no audience that can't be tackled here. And let's think about that for a second. If we think about CBS, its whole business model really is to attract as many people as possible. That's why shows like Big Bang Theory, 2.5 Men aren't necessarily intellectually savvy. It's not to say that they're bad shows by any stretch of the imagination. I personally enjoy them, but they don't incorporate wit or subtleties or other artistic devices because CBS is meant to attract as many eyeballs as possible. And typically they have the oldest audience out of out of NBC, Fox, and ABC. So CBS typically has that. We know with NBC, the comedy and dramas tend to be a bit more intellectual, a bit more witty. That is done on purpose. They are trying to appeal toward a high household median income audience group. And so those groups tend to be well educated and appreciate a little bit more from their programming. When we look at Viacom, Viacom has Nickelodeon, it has BET, it has Comedy Central. And so we know across all of these particular channels that there are different audiences there. You can target older males, perhaps on a Comedy Central. You can also target African Americans on BET. You can also target children or tweens on Nickelodeon. And you can also target perhaps college audiences through young adulthood with MTV, arguably. right? So these are certain pitches that these particular channels and conglomerate, because remember, CBS is a media legacy TV network and Viacom is a conglomerate, a cable channel and film conglomerate. But together, yeah, they can certainly make pitches to advertisers that, listen, we have different audiences that come to us. And so we can have a conversation about who do you need, and we'll get you there. We'll figure out the right placement for your advertisement. And so that's hopefully what this merger will produce for both the CBS network and for Viacom, the conglomerate itself. Let's move along. Disney. Disney has recently absorbed Fox. We do know about this. I couldn't help finding these particular images. I thought that they were great. Disney literally taking a bite out of Fox. And Homer, who is known to choke his son, particularly in the older episodes, is now choking Mickey Mouse. Welcome to the family, man. So it's kind of a Simpsons joke, if you will. And so Fox really wanted to get out of the entertainment content. They could not see themselves as competing against Netflix and HBO and Disney. They just didn't feel like they could do it. Disney wanted to ramp up SVOD services. I suspect Disney has been thinking about this probably for the last 5 years. Now, of course, the trouble is a lot of these legacy media companies waited. I mean, how long have we had digital Netflix? Since 2010? It's 2019 now. NBC, Disney, all of these legacy companies have waited almost a decade to get into the digital SVOD market. Ouch! Would you want to wait an entire decade before you started embracing a particular trend in your industry? I wouldn't want to do that, but Disney and Fox have waited. They have waited and waited and waited. NBC is guilty of this as well. All of these legacy companies waited. Not recommended. So because of this, there's added pressure on Disney to come with a punch and come aggressive and hungry and showing their teeth. Because Netflix has been in the game for almost a decade now with digital SVOD. Hulu has been in the game for, I think, about 8 years now as well, if memory serves right. And I believe we've had Amazon Prime Video for maybe about 5 or 6 years. And so these companies are already in the game. And so Disney has to have teeth. And how do you have teeth? You have content. And so Disney wishes to ramp up future SVOD offerings. It goes up to $71 billion because Comcast is right on top of them, also trying to absorb Fox. Justice Department approves the deal, but ESPN is asked to sell off 22 regional sports networks to prevent some sort of monopolization, because ESPN, as you can imagine, is dangerously close to having a monopoly on sports, entertainment, and news. So that had to happen in order for this merger to go through. Disney right now owns 21st Century Fox. It gains Deadpool. It already has Marvel characters, FX, Fox stake in Hulu, National Geographic, and the Fox stake in Sky, which is a news network, which is most popular in Europe. Fox has retained its Fox Broadcasting Network and stations. This includes the Fox News Channel, Fox Business Networks, and other assets. Because again, a legacy media firm understands that, well, I don't know about creating an X-Men show. I think that Disney can do a better job of it. After all, they've absorbed Star Wars and they've done quite well. But what I can do is I can hold on to news and I can hold on to sports. Why? Because everybody still watches those live. We still have time appointment viewing for watching news and sports live, don't we? If any of you watch, I don't know, Don Lemon on CNN or any of the nightly news, or if you put on the 5 o'clock news or whatever, that's still appointment viewing, right? You're going to watch it at 5 o'clock and you want to know what's going on at that time. Additionally, with sports, although there is some delayed viewing with news and there is some delayed viewing with sports, people still want to sit down at 1 o'clock to go see the New York Giants destroy the Dallas Cowboys. I might be showing my colors here. I am an avid New York Giants fan, but people still want to sit down for live programs, especially with sports and news. So it behooves Fox, and they've felt that way, to kind of stay in that environment, because I suspect, and I think they are right, I don't think that is going to change that much. People still want their news instantly at certain times of the day, and I think you can make the argument for sports as well. Let's move along. How's it going so far? It's actually been a pretty rough start for 21st Century Fox, currently in 7th place in the US market share. It's behind all of its studio rivals. So it's behind Disney, it's behind Sony, it's behind Viacom, which is Paramount Pictures, it's behind Universal, which is part of NBC and is part of Comcast. It's behind all of them. Fox is not doing so hot right now. Bob Iger, the CEO, president, whatever you'd like to call him, grand poobah of Disney, ripped them apart actually in a shareholders call, I think in August of 19, So a few things are going on right now with the Fox merger. Poor box office numbers. X-Men Dark Phoenix, Stuber, and The Art of Racing in the Rain have been box office flops. They have not done well. Viability of projects. Disney has stopped production on numerous Fox-slated movies. Alan Horn and Alan Bergman, chief creative officers, are redefining the corporate culture at Fox, and they want them to run more like Disney, was what Bob Iger had stated. Disney is currently working on figuring out how to fit Deadpool into Marvel's cinematic universe. Disney has ordered reimaginings of Fox library titles. This includes Home Alone, this includes Night at the Museum, it does include Cheaper by the Dozen, and Diary of a Wimpy Kid, as well as Planet of the Apes for its digital platform. And so Disney is not wasting any time in ramping up content production for its upcoming streaming service. Let's move along. The final piece of any kind of lecture on media finance, mergers and acquisition is pricing. At the end of the day, we really do have to think about the consumer here. Across all of this macro activity, across firms and firm behavior, we have to think about also what we price for consumers. What do we charge people for even consuming our content? And so with media pricing, it's important to kind of think about, well, how do we charge somebody for something? What do we give them access to? Let's move along. Pricing strategies. So when we think about pricing strategies, under perfect competition, price is determined by interaction of buyers and sellers in the marketplace. Monopolies do allow for uniform pricing. Should prices be tied to consumption? This is a question that is on the mind of every entertainment executive out there. This is super important when we think about what prices we should charge people, and do we charge them for the amount of times they come? Now, if they come quite often to television or to the movie theater, do we charge them for every time they come in? Or do we give them a subscription service? And we know that this has been played around with MoviePass, which unfortunately just declared bankruptcy and has folded, although the owner is trying to resuscitate it. Or do we do something like Netflix? Or do we do something like Hulu? Or much of the TV packages that are currently in the marketplace, in which people pay one flat fee and you can watch as much television as you want. You won't be penalized. You won't be charged more. You're just charged more for access. Let's move along. Usage-based pricing. So this is linked to specific individual value of the product, so to speak. The production and allocation of goods and services is more efficient, and the usage pricing permits a generally higher degree of price discrimination. And so what this means is, if we're thinking about where this typically happens, and you can see it at the bottom bullet, this is used in movie theaters and for stage plays, for sure. When you go see a Broadway show, when you go see Joker this weekend, when you go see any kind of show or happening, you pay a ticket price. You pay one time to come in. Now, this is most useful when products exhibit exclusivity. Is it exclusive currently to see Joker? Well, of course it is, because currently it's about to debut in 2 days in movie theaters it is exclusive to movie theaters. You cannot see it anywhere else unless you find some sort of bootleg version of the particular movie. And so the transaction costs are also low. All you need to do is just purchase a ticket and you're in. It's very easy to do. And so because the transaction costs are low, you can have high volume of transactions, can't you? If we think about a movie theater, it probably sits about, 50 to 80 people, I suspect. And so because of that, it's very easy to have people purchase 50 tickets. They come into the movie theater, they give their credit card to someone, or increasingly they buy their own movie tickets on a screen. It doesn't really cost much. And when value differentials may be exploited through price discrimination, movie theaters do engage in price discrimination. We have matinees, right? So you may spend $15 to take your boyfriend or girlfriend to the movies, and so you each may pay $15 each on a Friday night or on a Saturday night, but we know that like a Wednesday matinee or a Sunday matinee probably means you might be paying $12 for that same ticket, or even $10. We also know there's price discrimination with senior citizens and with students, both of whom get discounts at the movie theater. If you don't know this already, make sure you show your student ID at certain movie theaters. They will give you discounts, and I have been the happy recipient of that many times. So these are some ways in which usage-based pricing can be employed when we think about pricing particular products and services from the entertainment industry. Let's move along. Access-based pricing. So here we have kind of a TV menu here, and this is one of my favorite shows, Silicon Valley on HBO. I nerd out pretty hard, and this is one show that you can nerd out pretty hard on. Access-based pricing. So, Silicon Valley is on HBO, and you pay a subscription for that, right? You pay for access. We pay for access with Netflix. We pay for access if we have a subscription to Spotify or Pandora. And so this abandons the goal of linking price to individual item consumption in favor of a fee that's tied to the ability to use a network and its products. Now, we usually do this when we want to employ some sort of flat rate pricing. We know that everybody here probably pays either 10 or 12 or whatever tiered pricing package you've purchased for Hulu, right? You pay more if you don't want advertisements, you pay less if you don't care about advertisements and you're happy to have them in your subscription plan. And so with flat rate pricing, with subscriptions, we know that this is, it's difficult to charge people individually for NBC. Jordan, how much NBC did you see? Samantha, how much NBC did you watch? Aaron, how much ABC or AMC did you watch? Fatima, how much Hulu did you watch? It's very difficult to price based on user activity. I think that would be an utter nightmare. And so you can see in the third bullet here, this strategy is most useful when exclusivity is hard to enforce, when transaction costs are high, and if there is uncertainty about the value of a specific product network. And so for Michelle, for Sharona, for other people, they do this all the time. They embark on this when they stream video, they stream radio. You could argue with video gaming. PlayStation and Xbox have these pass programs in which you can subscribe and pay $15 a month and have exclusive access to all of these video games and other features and services. And so it works out well when you don't want to charge people for every transaction that they do on these systems. Let's move along. And finally, just to kind of reiterate what price discrimination is, it's known as differential pricing. It's this ability to engage based around differences, either in products or groups of consumers, and usually in the entertainment industry, it's one or the other. We can discriminate, and we can charge senior citizens less to go to the movie theaters, and we can charge students less to go to the movie theaters. These are groups of consumers. With products, we can certainly differentiate when we have tiered pricing systems, right? You may pay more for your Hulu subscription so you don't have advertisements. Others may pay less, but just have to sit through advertisements. And so that's a product differentiation there. This depends on there being sufficiently different levels of perceived value to justify differential pricing. So there may be perceived value because students, younger people, may not be or have enough disposable income to go to the movies. I mean, purchasing a ticket right now is about $15. Senior citizens don't work, and college students may or may not work or may not have enough disposable income. These are two different populations that don't really have money. So the perceived value there is, can we get more students in and senior citizens in? Because after all, movie theaters make the bulk of their money from snacks. They make the bulk of their money from popcorn, and recently, alcohol is now the number one product sales-wise for movie theaters. And so it follows that if we can get more students in and more senior citizens in, they'll buy more popcorn. So sure, we can take a hit on the ticket. It doesn't matter because it's $1 or $2, or maybe it's $3, but they may spend $8 for popcorn. It's a win for the movie theater. It allows firms to capture more of the social surplus in the market. We can capture more of these people. As we stated earlier, movie theaters offer these prices for senior citizens, students, as well as time of performance. Let's move along. Profitability ratios. So when we think of media pricing, the last thing I want to go over with you, ladies and gentlemen, is really thinking about between audiences and companies and everything else, how do we evaluate the health of a company? We've gone over mergers and acquisitions. We've gone over different ways to look at a company. We've gone over different ways to price items for customers, and we've gone over how these mergers happen. Ultimately, though, we want to know about the health of a company. It's so vital that we do this. And so with profitability ratios, it's important here to consider a few items here. Many media firms have net incomes that are negative, but still generate positive cash flow. You'll never be tested on this formula, and I'm being absolutely forthright with that. You're not going to be tested here. I just want you to know how these particular metrics are determined here. What's important to know here is a metric called earnings per share, otherwise known as EPS, and you can find this on Yahoo Finance for any stock that you look up. And so EPS is determined by the net income after all the costs have been calculated, subtracted by preferred dividends, so the kinds of dividend yields that are given out to shareholders, divided by the amount of shares that are available. Now, what you need to know here, truthfully, is that earnings per share is a metric for the present. It is a metric for the present. This is a way in which for us to better understand what is going on in the present. What is the health of the company in the present? And so a high EPS, a growth of 25%, suggests the products and services are currently in demand from that company. Now, the way to know if you have a strong EPS in a marketplace is to compare yourself against others. So if you're looking at Disney's EPS on Yahoo Finance, what you might do is you might take it and compare it against Viacom, compare it against Comcast, and you can look up these stocks. If Disney has a higher EPS than those competitors, then you know that Disney is currently in demand. That's important to understand here. The way that we understand the value of EPS on a stock menu, if say we're looking up Disney, is to compare it against its competitors. That's how we figure out who has the strongest EPS, who has the strongest performance right now. Additionally, what I also have listed here as a bullet point is market cap, market capitalization. This is the total value of the company. The way that this is figured out is multiplying the stock price times the total amount of outstanding shares, or the shares that are currently held by owners as well as capital stock. This is a way for you to gain a sense of how valuable do shareholders ultimately see this particular company. Let's move along. PE ratio. Price to earnings ratio. Now, again, you will never have to do this formula in class, but it is important to understand how this is calculated and what this means. What I want you to know is that it calculates price per share divided by the earnings per share that we get, and that's the PE ratio. Now, this allows for comparison of the current price share against the earnings per share, so to speak. The average market PE ratio is 20 to 25. Now, different from EPS, different from earnings per share, price to earnings ratio is a measurement for the future. Please note that. PE ratio is a measurement for the future. What do investors think of the company in the future? A high PE ratio means investors expect high earnings in the future, but it also may suggest an overvalued stock. The way to figure this out, the way to understand a high PE ratio, is to actually do the same thing, the very same thing I suggested to you, in order to get a better sense of the value behind EPS. What you will do is you will take the PE ratio of Disney and compare it against Viacom, Comcast, and other competitors. When you do this, you get a better sense of whose PE ratio is best. That's important to note when you're trying to figure out, is this company on a good trajectory? Is it looking good for the future? We know what it's doing currently, but is it looking good for the future? When we look at earnings per share, which is a present metric, and we look at PE ratio, which is a metric or measurement of the future, what investors think of the company for the future, for its future, we gain a better picture of what's going on with the company. Let's move along. And finally, stock prices. It's super important to understand a stock price and what a stock really is. This is the price of a single share of a company. It suggests that highest amount the prospective investor will invest in. It is the highest price somebody will pay for a share. Disney's, I believe, as of this broadcast, is about $130 per share. That is the most somebody will pay, and therefore that is what the stock price is. Dividend. Some of these stocks will pay a quarterly or biannual dividend, and so they may pay 2%, and so they may pay 2% of the stock value per quarterly to investors. This is used as a tactic to ask people to spend more. So for instance, if Disney awards its shareholders a dividend, that means it is telling them essentially, thank you so much for investing in us. Here's $5, here's $10. Please consider in investing in us more. That is the goal of a dividend, that the company pays a dividend and that shareholders will say, you know what, thank you for the $10. We're going to reinvest this back into the company. Slow-growing businesses tend to pay dividends as they need to keep earnings to invest and to remain attractive to prospective investors. Every company has its own philosophy. I have stock in Nintendo. Nintendo does not give dividend yields. There is no quarterly payout. So the only way that I could really make money off of my Nintendo stock is to eventually sell it at a very high price. And so those are different considerations for a shareholder. But when we're valuing media companies, you can quickly see how difficult it can be to figure out the value of a company and to figure out whether or not a company should merge with another company and to figure out what to charge people. And so in this lecture, I hope what you can see very clearly is that media firms really do have a lot on their plate. It's difficult to figure out, what do I merge with? Who do I work with? It's also difficult to figure out, what do I price my stuff at? Do I charge people a subscription rate? Do I charge people just kind of a ticket price? And also, what's the value of my company? Do I look at my stock price? Is it good? How's my earnings per share? What about EP? What about PE ratio? And what about my market capitalization? Ultimately, with this lecture, I hope you can see the complexities that are in the media industry. It's not easy to finance any of this stuff. But hopefully through this particular lecture, I've helped illuminate certain concepts for you. That's kind of all the time we have on Late Night Learning. As always, keep laughing and keep learning.